Jurassic Park is a franchise that's far more expansive than most people realize. Most internet pundits purposefully ignore a lot of its success and instead tend to only focus on the first film that came out in '93, for convoluted reasons that always come off as pretty ignorant and pretentious in my opinion. One of the things that's often unfortunately overlooked is the fact that that particular film was actually based off of an already pre-existing IP that was created by none other than Michael Klayton himself, one of the most prolific and influential science fiction writers of all time. With that being said, it should come to no surprise that a lot of the supplementary material that has come out in the Jurassic franchise has fallen by the wayside over the last 29 years. With a clear prejudice directed towards the Spielberg film adaptation and nothing else, big internet news outlets tend to forget about things that have an equally impressive reputation, even if it may not be nearly as positive as the former.
InGen standard safari vehicle, state of the art.
Jurassic Park Trespasser was a video game that was released in 1998 for the PC. Recently, I've played through the entire campaign on my channel, and while it's taken me a while to gather my thoughts and formulate my words accordingly, I finally think I'm ready to sum up what I personally consider to be a pretty underrated experience. With that being said, Trespasser is by no stretch of the imagination a masterpiece. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I did not play this game when it was originally released. Instead, I picked it up for the first time at the end of 2018. The version that I played through apparently had a hardwired patch bundled with it that made sure that the game would run properly on modern computers, and it even went out of its way to fix many of the game-breaking glitches and problems that the title faced upon its initial release. Needless to say, when I finally got around to playing the game, I was immediately surprised to see how playable the product actually was. Keep in mind, what's available today is the fixed version, which is something that needs to be considered when watching this review.
By 1989, International Genetic Technologies had succeeded in their design to genetically recreate the dinosaurs.
When you first start up the game, you're going to be greeted with voiceover by Richard Attenborough, who is reprising his role as John Hammond from Jurassic Park and the Lost World. He tells you the basic backstory of what's going on inside of Trespasser's universe. And no, it isn't canon. Trespasser tells its story by merging the material from the Klayton novel and the first two films. As cool as this sounds, it ends up creating massive plot holes and timeline discrepancies that a brachiosaurus could walk through. And for the initiated Jurassic fan, it can be painfully obvious at times that what was written was just not looked over with a fine continuity comb. A good example would be the fact that Trespasser claims that the first film's events take place in 1989 instead of 1993, yet it still says that the events of Lost World happened in 1997. However, if you've actually seen The Lost World, you'll know that Hammond says specifically that he's made a point of trying to keep Site B safe for 4 years, which is since 1993. Never mind the fact that 1992 Jeep Wranglers wouldn't make much sense for 1989. Despite these flaws, Trespasser's story truly is immersive and very intriguing for any fan of the franchise at any given age. Characters like John Hammond's business partner, Norman Atherton, are referenced heavily, and before the release of the Jurassic World films, this kind of adherence to novel lore didn't really happen in the franchise. So it's at the very least a really nice acknowledgement that Jurassic Park is more than just a single movie from '93.
Henry Wu was an only child from Ohio, a prodigy. He gained early attention for his undergraduate thesis at MIT.
The graphics of Trespasser are pretty impressive for the time in which they were designed, and in the modern age, it runs at a smooth 60 FPS, so there's really nothing to complain about for a game that's over 20 years old. Sure, there are some obvious pop-in effects and sometimes low-resolution textures, but a lot of the game is just too beautiful to really pay any of that other stuff any serious mind. The physics system is something that also needs to be historically talked about. For its time, Trespasser was way ahead of the curve. Just looking at this footage should be enough to sell you on the way things play out in the game's reality. It's top-tier stuff that has a few goofy moments now and then, mainly because it was trying something pretty groundbreaking in the late 90s. But honestly, if you've never played it before, you're probably going to be blown away by how unique and intuitive the game really is. But nothing is inherently perfect in any medium that's ever existed, and Trespasser is no exception. I had my fair share of odd moments where I couldn't couldn't make it onto a ledge or witnessed my arm contorting into a creepy position that God just simply did not intend. Suffice it to say, it has its bugs, but they're nowhere near what people have made them out to be over the years. Speaking of which, controlling your character, Anne, can be pretty entertaining once you get the hang of it. You're able to move her arm in really any position you'd like to, which makes lining up shots extremely satisfying when they land a killing hit on a velociraptor. The gameplay often consists of box puzzles, keycard scavenger hunts, and outsmarting dangerous dinosaurs on your journey all over the island. And the mechanics of the mouse controls make it a uniquely engaging experience that you won't really find anywhere else. On your trek through Site B, you'll be joined with the ominous voice of John Hammond emanating from your speakers, his detailing of the building and construction of Isla Sorna telling a great tale that will stick with you for some time.
What if a mosquito sucked the blood of a dinosaur 100 million years ago? The insect is then covered in tree sap, which, over the millennia, becomes amber.
Enemies in Trespasser are, of course, dinosaurs. Unfortunately, this is where I think the game has its biggest problems. The one thing that you fight more than anything else is raptors, and yeah, it can get pretty boring after a while. Tyrannosaurs and Albertosaurs do make appearances sporadically in the playthrough, but not nearly enough to add the necessary variety that the game really needs in my personal opinion. Herbivores like trikes, stegos, paras, and brax can be seen very rarely as well, and as cool as those may be, they just don't happen enough for you to really feel like you're on the same dinosaur island from the movies. Sometimes the game just feels so empty. I'm sure that has something to do with the development going through hell, and I'm not trying to chastise anyone about it. I'm just letting you know ahead of time that Site B feels like it was conquered by raptors more than the island that I know of from the Lost World. Another thing that I think turns out being a negative on the game's part is just the fact that Trespasser is extremely short. Sure, I logged in quite a few hours playing it, but after I was done, I couldn't help but wonder just how awesome it would have been if there was around 3 to 4 more levels for me to explore. Make no mistake, this is a fun game, but to have it cut short with only 8 measly levels, one can finish it and feel kind of deprived. Nevertheless, at the end of my playthrough, I must admit that I did indeed walk away satisfied with what I'd gone through. Trespasser is a groundbreaking experience and an immersive trek into the wilds of Isla Sorna that we have never seen replicated in any dinosaur game that's come after it. Upon its initial release, the game was met with extreme negativity, and it's garnered a reputation of being one of the worst video games ever made. As of 2019, this quite simply is not true. Modern PCs are able to play this thing super easy, and if you ever do run into any troubles playing it, the dedicated fanbase over at trescom.org can help you fix anything in a heartbeat. And it's unfortunate that this is where the game has had to retreat to and thrive in the many years that have passed since '98, because I truly believe that there is more here than what a lot of people give it credit for. But it goes back to the simple fact that many publishers and media outlets adhere to the dogma that the only good thing with Jurassic Park in the title is the first movie. Now that I've gone out of my way to say all of that, I do want to make a point that I personally don't believe this to be a transcendent experience that every Jurassic fan needs to play in order to be initiated into the fandom. It's a good game, don't get me wrong, but for some reason, there's this weird sort of cultish aura that I see around the first 2 movies and Trespasser, and I don't honestly understand it. I've witnessed a strange minority of about 3 or 4 individuals during my playthrough that straight up say that anybody that enjoys anything that came out after this isn't a real fan, and that they're only apologists to the later entries. Well, in my humble opinion, that's bullshit. And this is coming from a guy who loves The Lost World more than any other movie in the series. Still, there are strengths and weaknesses in everything. Lost World has a clear and present character problem that gatekeepers tend to ignore, and it can be frustrating for someone that wants to talk about these films honestly. Everybody in that movie is written and presented as static, and not a soul changes in its runtime. The only one that gets an arc is my favorite character in the franchise, Roland Timbo, and since they cut Ajay's early bar scene, even that doesn't have the impact it could have had. I think the gatekeeping that comes with Trespasser and Lost World mainly stem from the fact that they were stories that clearly had a lot of good things going for them, but they unfortunately got slaughtered by critics when they first came out, and too much of it was factually unfair. So a weird us versus them level of tribalism could have been born from constant slander and negativity that was nurtured over the years. Make no mistake, Trespasser is underrated. It's been beaten into the ground and chastised for things that simply do not exist in the game's modern incarnation. But the past is the past. It's time to move on. If you're looking for a Jurassic game that hybridizes the novel and movie canons into its story, well then look no further, friend. Enjoy Richard Attenborough's awesome voiceover as he tells you the history of how Site B was created and what life was like for the workers on the island. Have fun running from Rexes and shooting bullets into raptors. It might not be the greatest game ever made, but you won't be wasting your time with it, no matter what you choose to do. Get lost in Jurassic Park Trespasser. I'm sure you're going to have a pretty fun time. Now before I go, I want to thank all of my game wardens, as well as all of my InGen executives. I'd also like to thank all of my park workers and InGen hunters as well. Just the fact that you guys watch these videos and support my content means the world to me, and I want to make sure that all of you never forget that. Now I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to watch today's video, and hope that you all had fun. I'll see you all in the next one, guys, and as always, take it easy.